and 40 nights.
So hey guys, welcome back. This is our 34th installment of our Lenten challenges, and 35 will be today as well. And today is Thursday, Maundy Thursday specifically, and that's the night and day that we commemorate Jesus meeting in the upper room with his disciples to have the Last Supper. Now, for those of you who don't remember, the Last Supper in the upper room is when Jesus gave an important commandment, and that's where Maundy comes from, and commandment. And it's also the idea that this is the night where they celebrated Passover. So what I'm going to do today is basically talk about a little bit about Passover and a little bit about what Jesus did with the Passover meal that we commemorate now. Because this time of year, Easter itself happens during the time of Passover, similar to Hanukkah to Christmas, and we have Passover and we have Easter. And the reason is because the whole reason Jesus was in Jerusalem to begin with was because he was there with his friends to celebrate Passover, and of course everything else that had to happen. But this wasn't the first time, but this was the most important time. So as a person who celebrated Passover, he was there to do exactly that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that today, like basically what is it that they ate for the Last Supper was the question. Like, what's the Passover meal? And on the other hand, I'm going to say, and what did Jesus do during that meal? Like, what did he do with it? Kind of a thing. So it's a twofer about eating. So with that in mind, I'm here with my laptop and I got the clock ready. So I'm going to try. Listen, I know I've been trying for 1 minute. I know I've been trying for 2. This might take me 3. So let's see how we go. Ready? And that's including what I'm going to have to preamble with. Go. So, Passover. Basically, it's a traditional Jewish meal that commemorates the Jewish people escaping from Egypt and getting freedom. That's the smallest way I can do it. And to go into that a little bit more, Moses, not me, the other one, was trying to free his people. He went to Pharaoh, who was enslaving the Jewish people at the time. Pharaoh was the king of Egypt, and he basically told him 9 times, listen, let my people go, and 9 times Pharaoh said no, and 9 times God sent a plague, whether it was bloody rivers or whether it was locusts and other bugs and frogs and hailstorms made of fire and all this stuff. And the last plague, number 10, is the one that Pharaoh chose for himself. He said, listen, I'm fed up with all this. I'm going to kill each of your firstborn sons, talking about all the Jewish folks. And Moses just went, you've just cursed yourself. And that's what happened. So the spirit of death was going to come, sent by God, to take away the very same children over in Egypt. But to protect themselves, any doorpost marked with the sacrificial blood of a lamb that they ate was going to be used. Like, you mark the door, basically, with this lamb's blood, and then you cooked that same lamb whole and you ate it. That's from our Exodus reading for tonight. And you ate that whole thing, and you had to eat a few other things too, because you had to eat with your shoes on and with your bags packed, because you had to be ready to go, because as soon as it started they were going to be let go. And that's the preamble to this. So now at Passover they have a special plate that they remembered. The Jewish people remember all of these things. Each one has a symbol. So it's called a Seder meal. I'm saying it wrong. Seder meal. And at this Seder meal, there's a plate, and the plate has a roasted lamb bone, represents the sacrificial lamb that they had to use, an egg that represents spring and new life, bitter herbs, which represents the hard times of slavery, harisset, which is like an applesauce, and it kind of is like the mud that they used to make bricks to make the pyramids, because that's what they did. Karpas, which is greens, like turnip greens, only for them it's parsley or something, and that also represents spring and renewal and new life. And they also had pieces of bread, unleavened bread, flat bread, it's kind of crackery, kind of firm, called matzah. And matzah bread is used because they couldn't wait for their bread to rise in the ovens. They had to make bread without yeast, and they had this flat crackery bread because they had to run. They didn't have time to wait, so they had to be ready. So this bread reminds them that we were free and ran off and we had to have everything ready. This is what we had to use. There's also a dish of salty water that represents the tears that were shed for the slavery years and everything else too. There's also cups of wine. Everybody gets a cup of wine. I don't know if the kids do. But there's one in particular that's put at an empty seat and a plate set for Elijah. Now, for those of you who remember, I think I mentioned this in talks before, Elijah was one of the only prophets who was flown away to heaven on a chariot of fire, which is awesome. But it also meant that he didn't die to go to heaven. He just went. God called him up. And he was the only prophet that was recorded in the Old Testament that happened to. So the Jewish people were always saying, well, just in case Elijah shows up, we'll have a plate ready for him. And that's why they kept asking Jesus if he was Elijah, because he was doing a lot of the similar things. So this meal commemorates all of those things. The fact that they were free, the fact that they were given new life, led into the promised land, that they escaped from hardship into something better that God had promised them. And in all of this, it's surrounded, and it's based on a sacrifice and a loss through slavery and through a lamb that had to be sacrificed and blood used in order to mark those who were being made free. And then on the other hand, all these foods that each have a symbol too. So that's Passover. That's the meal. There were other things too. Sometimes you would have soup and brisket and all these other things too, traditionally, that you'd have as part of this meal too. But these are the major things that you would have at a Passover meal, and that's what Jesus would have been eating with his friends tonight. Oh dear God. 4 minutes. Wow. Well, thankfully I'm almost done, so these can be a bit longer, I guess. But that's what it is. And I mean, jeepers, 4 minutes to explain exactly what Passover is? Thank you. I did my best. So that's what Jesus and his friends in the upper room were having. Now, for part 2, I'm going to talk about what Jesus did and what Passover meal became that night. So stay safe and pray safe, and here's part 2.